Hello. What's up, man?
Let me
Yeah.
I haven't gone officially live on my Facebook. There seems to be an issue. But anyway,
All right. How do I don't know. I can't seem to get this to go on Facebook. You got to show me how to do that.
well, obviously I'm not
Yeah. All right.
no. Well, welcome to Family Matters. How are you? Kevin Peterson, the one and
I'm
only.
I'm good, Jay Staples, out here in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, in the southeast regional office of Jaywalker Lodge. You look like you're a little wiped out there, bro.
Yeah, I played golf in scorching heat, and I don't, never was one that didn't drink enough water, but I think I just kind of got drained. But anyway,
All
life
right.
is good. So,
I'll carry you.
all right, we did Family Matters, sponsored by the one and only Jaywalker Lodge. We do this to the best of our abilities. Kind of looks like it's moving to Fridays instead of Thursdays, but
Sure.
around this time ish, to the best of our ability ish. But calm fears, anxieties, answer questions. The one and only Kevin. We try to stump him. We haven't done it yet, but anyway, Kevin, how goes it?
Jay, it's a great day, baby. It's a great day. June 12th. God, we're in the middle of June. Who would have thought, That happened fast, right? Wasn't it just February? I mean, good God. So
It was just 2024, actually. I mean, I'm not even saying February. I'm saying it's going by fast. I'll just say that. So
I agree. I agree. What's on the agenda today?
well, who knows? Well, I thought we've had a lot of inquiries in the last couple years, months, whatever. I want to get into specifically the struggle with implementing, keeping, acknowledging boundaries within families. I mean, we can go in depth with it. I think that's what I'm noticing is boundaries overwhelmingly are the theme and the questions and so forth like that. And so let's just start in general. What would you say is the couple top issues with, the follow through, the enforcing? Is it the making of boundaries? What would you say is the struggle with boundaries?
Well, I think there is a certain amount of so boundaries, let's review a couple of things basically. Boundaries are not about the other person, they're about you. Okay? It's about you saying this is what I will tolerate and this is what I won't tolerate. And then it's about you following through. That's the hard part. Because it means, changing this family system, right? So let's just imagine we're talking about a 25, 30-year-old man in the house, of parents and, failure to launch, classic situation. And mom and dad are like, you need to get a job. You need to quit smoking weed. You need to quit, doing all this stuff. But they're not willing to make a change in the family system. They're not willing to hold him accountable. So their struggle is that, I tell him all this stuff and he doesn't do anything. And so what I tell them is, well, what's his incentive? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what happens if he doesn't do it? I'm like, well, nothing. I'm like, okay, so there's the first problem. Okay, you have to be willing to apply the consequences of not following through to the other person. And if you're not, then you're not ready yet. That's really what it comes down to. And then so the first one is setting the boundary, the second one is holding the boundary. And why the question really becomes, why is that hard? Because there's this inherent fear that they're going to get mad and not like me, and they're going to go do something and hurt themselves. And let's be honest, alcoholics and addicts have learned what the right things to say are to tweak out the family. So when mom and dad lay it down, he's like, well, I'll just go out and live with my friends and shoot dope and kill myself. Is that what you want? And they're like, no, and oh, my credit's going to get ruined. They're going to repossess my car, all of which happened to me, by the way, and I own homes, and cars. So I think internally, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling on here, but we talked about this a couple of weeks ago that my friend Craig from my office said he was noticing with his 4-year-old daughter that his biggest challenge is that when he was trying to help her, instead of coming at her with a place of spiritual neutrality and love and compassion, he realized he was coming out of his own wounds. He hadn't addressed his wounds. And it came to his mind that, okay, well, what I have to do, I have to go address my wounds in my world and the way I do that. And then I can be available to her and really do my best job for her. And that was like a big aha moment for him. And he shared that in a meeting. And I was just like, you have just literally summed up everything we do here. Helping the family address their own stuff will then allow them to be more present and not react out of their wounds for the guy. There you go.
Would you say it's harder? Do you think people struggle more with setting of the boundary or the struggling of, when their loved ones push back, or, i.e. enforcement of said boundary? What do you think?
It's the
do people just kind of not set the boundary out of the tale they tell themselves in their minds?
Well, I think they initially try, right? And then it doesn't work. So then then you get to that space where they're like, well, it's not going to work anyway, so why should I do it? And so what I try to get across to them is, well, what's his incentive to change? He gets to live at home. He doesn't have to work, or he works minimally. He gets his food. He gets his place to live. His clothes are washed, and he has access to a car and the internet and a phone. So why should he change anything? He's getting everything he wants. So that's what has to happen. You have to change the internal system. And then the original question you asked, right, is why is that so hard for me? And why, when I lay it down, why do I feel so awful internally? And the answer is that it's because you haven't addressed your stuff. So then the next question is, okay, what does that mean? And how do we do that? And I'm happy to answer that, but I don't want to talk the entire time.
No, go ahead. How do you do that? I'm intrigued now. That's called a tease.
I know, right? So here's the answer. Get a load of this. If you send somebody to treatment where they're going to see a therapist, potentially a doctor and a psychiatrist, and go to 12-step meetings, and they're going to heal their wounds, guess what you get to do? You get to go see a therapist. You get to look into some 12-step groups. You may need to see a doctor or a psychiatrist. I'm not saying you have to I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you, you are not going to be able to address your wounds on your own reading a book. Just like he's not going to be able to get, clean of drugs and alcohol on his own reading a book or watching a YouTube video. You're going to have to engage. You cannot expect him to do something you're not willing to do. And that's the scary part, right? Because now the focus isn't on the person, the addict or the alcoholic. Now the focus is on the entire family system, and every member of the system has to heal themselves. Not just that guy over there, So that's the hard part. It's a scary part, right? Because now I got to dig in and do work. At Jaywalker, I have created this thing called Jaywalker Lodge University. It's an online portal of education for the families. And a lot of times they look at it and they're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing this because that means I'm going to have to really focus on myself and dig in. And I'm like, I understand, but that's why I'm here to help you. Let me guide you through that process. Let me help you find someone in your neighborhood to go see as a therapist. And, let's figure things out. And let's find a 12-step meeting, or maybe it's a church meeting, or I don't know, whatever. It can be whatever, but a group of people that are fighting the same battle, that are supportive, And that way you're in a community just like the person in treatment or the person in recovery.
Well, I also think it's interesting when talking with families, and I think it gets when addiction and mental health and substance misuse, however you want to frame it, gets involved. That seems to be the overriding kind of theme. But what I think is interesting to point out, and families kind of have this oh crap moment, is when I point out that, that mainly the family is a mom and dad or something, but the boundaries is not just with the addicted loved one. Like, they're still bailing the other sibling out and not allowing them to grow. The only difference is one has a substance issue that, ends up in jails or treatment or something. The other one, they're still being robbed of the growing up experience or the consequences of their decisions. So it's not just, even when we're talking about the boundaries, putting in with that loved one that's suffering, I think the boundaries need to be family wide and so forth. That's what I always find interesting.
No, 100%. I mean, it's not just, again, the old school methodology, right, is identifying what we call the identified patient, you and me. Oh, there's Jay and Kevin. They're the problem.
Yeah.
Let's remove them from the ecosystem, drop them into a treatment environment or whatever, AA treatment environment, and then they will get all better and come back. And what ends up happening is that person comes back and they have changed, right? And they come back to the family system, and the family system hasn't changed. They're still walking on eggshells and like, well, I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt his feelings, because then he may go get high or drink. And I'm like, if his sobriety is that fragile, he shouldn't come home. He should stay in treatment. But I also want you guys at home to start taking a long, hard look and addressing your stuff, because, it turns out that when we look at the way you've been handling your person, your identified patient, that might be symptomatic of something, some attachment disorders or some codependency, or maybe some trauma as a child, or maybe you grew up in an alcoholic home or had an alcoholic grandparent, and everybody learned how to, not make noise and walk on eggshells. And I'm telling you, it's not just the person in treatment. It's actually you were taught to behave like this as a child. And so let's go after that. One of my favorite statements is, happy families come from happy individuals. Happy individuals work on their shit. Everybody has shit. And then on the back of the t-shirt, we're going to say, and of course, we're going to talk about your childhood, because that's where all the secrets are. That's where all the secrets are, and it doesn't mean that you're a movie of the week. Just that's the next thing. I was like, whoa, I'm like, relax.
Yeah.
We're not condemning you. We're just saying, hey, you behave the way you behave as an adult because of the experiences you had as a child. And so let's take a look at that and figure out what that's all about. And then when I can help you heal, when that person comes home from treatment, and you're going to be healed up and you're going to have a better relationship with them, because it's not going to be this, codependent alcoholic or addict relationship. It's going to be an equal relationship. Mm-hmm. You're going to have great boundaries, and so are they, but the whole family has to get better, not just the person.
What would you say to the family, and I come across it a lot, and I'm sure everyone does, but is the implementing of, let me ask, I'll frame it this way. Do you feel, what's the connection between, I think families believe implementing of a boundary is more of like they're being grounded or something back in their childhood days or something. Their fear is that they won't be, let's just call, emotionally connected if they implement this boundary. And saying that out loud is like, we know the boundaries should not be seen as a consequence. But what would you say to the family? Like, how would they balance about putting in boundaries and staying emotionally connected with their loved one?
Yeah, oh my God. We'll write that one down. when we go back and watch this, we need to write, because that's huge. That's something I want to include that. Let's do a clip of that question, and I'll actually try and answer it. What was the question?
No pressure though. It better be a viral moment. I mean, we need to go viral.
I'm working on it. I'm trying. If I knew how, I would. Jeez. What was the question? How do you stay emotionally connected and hold boundaries? That's a great question. By being
there's the fear that families think that the boundaries are then going to alter their, they're going to.
Yeah. Well, they are. I mean, let's be honest, but that's because it needs to be altered. I think part of the reality is that the reason why you're having to say, hey, you need to quit drinking and doing drugs, or you need to go to work or go to school, or you need to go to, some sort of 12-step meeting or some sort of psychological or psychiatric help, is because you're done dealing with it. And that's you want to create systemic change, and you want to start with them. And that's perfectly okay. And of course they're going to react negatively. But again, now we're back to my premise. If you are taking care of yourself and you're taking care of your own therapy, your own, spiritual engagement, whatever it is, you can say those things to someone without having a big stick in your hand and trying to punish them into good behavior. You can't punish someone into good behavior. You can be present in the moment and say, God, I really love you. You're great, but I'm going to let you know I'm not okay with the drugs and the alcohol. And if you're going to live in this house, that's going to have to stop. If you don't want to stop, that's fine. You just can't live here. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to scorn you. I'm not going to look down on you. I'm not going to finger point at you. I'm just telling you, in my house, we don't have drugs and alcohol. And it's okay if you want to keep doing it. You just can't do it here. And the same thing. In my house, you have to either go to school or go to work, or a combo package of those two. And that's okay if you don't want to do those things. You just got to live somewhere else. And in my house, we all take care of our mental health. We all, whether it's 12 steps, whether it's therapy, whether, whatever you want to do to engage your mental health, but everybody here takes that as a priority. And if you want to stay here, then that's what you got to do. And let's remember, I'll help you. You having trouble with quitting drugs and alcohol? I'll help you. You having trouble finding a job and getting at school? I'll help you. You having trouble finding a therapist or a community of people? I'll help you. I'm not punishing you into this environment. I'm just telling you that in this engagement, this is how it works. It's like the HR department at work. They just come to you and say, hey, I know you like wearing, sandals and running shorts and tank tops, but that's not our dress code here at work, and that's not gonna work for us. And it's okay if you want to keep dressing like that. You just can't do it in this place. I had a situation where I worked for this big software company 20 something years ago, and they were switching over to Salesforce, and there was a lot of bitching and complaining. And this is $1 billion company, and my boss, who was the head of our sales department, there was a lot of pushback and a lot of people dragging their feet. And he called a quick meeting. He was like, I want you to understand something clearly. You will either adopt this process, or you will be given the opportunity to find employment elsewhere. He didn't say, I'm going to fire you. He was like, that's okay. If you don't want to do it, you just won't work here anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's the position you have to take as the family member. It's okay if you want to keep living like that. You just can't do it here. And it can't, we don't want that affecting us.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question?
I think so. Well, I think the fear is, or what everyone tells themselves is, if, implementing of boundaries, then that's all you're going to talk about within your loved one. And like I always remind, if the boundaries are respected by both sides of it, it very rarely comes up, because you don't really have to bring it up, because no one's testing it, and you can go back to laughing. And but I think families still believe that if they put in said boundaries or something, that their loved one, that's all they're thinking about, and that's all they want to talk about, or something like that. If you find yourself always talking about it, that means the boundary is probably working, but yet one half of the relationship isn't holding their end of the boundary. So I think families have this, if you put boundaries and both sides respect it, then it very rarely ever comes up, and you can still have, laugh and joke and, so forth like that. You just can't pick and choose when you implement that boundary. And then, on Sundays and Thursdays, that boundary doesn't exist. Like you have to keep it steady. Like you don't, like I always say, the addict alcoholic will look for the holes. They'll know that, in the past you have not followed through on it. So I'm just going to hold my breath until they relent. So obviously the follow through is the most important thing, but boundaries rarely come up if both sides respect it. It's not going to be all you talk about. You can still enjoy each other's company.
So the problem is that they haven't been held, so that when you do start holding them, yes, it is going to be the topic of conversation. Yes. So and I get it, and it's like, well, yeah, but all argues and complains and bitches, and I'm like, sure, because you're changing the family system, and when we change the family system, we get resistance. Because it requires effort, it requires vigilance, it requires accountability. And then, it also requires calling out the other person when they don't respect it. And that's okay. I mean, that's those things, consistency, accountability, and transparency are the foundations of a good family relationship, a good marriage, a good friendship. My wife and I have a great relationship because we are extremely consistent. We're accountable to each other, and we're transparent with each other. There's no secrets. There's no it's just how it works. And we entered into that agreement early on that this is how we wanted things to go. And it's not like one of us would all of a sudden be like, hey, I've decided to start buying cars, and the other one's like, hold on, I don't remember us discussing that, and it's like, that's the thing, right? Is that you have to be willing to put cards on the table and have the uncomfortable conversation, and it doesn't have to be a fight. That's another thing. So here's, okay, how much time we got? All right, maybe this is next week's topic, how to have the conversation. So let's write that down. How to have that boundaries conversation. How do you have that discussion without it turning into World War III? No problem. And we'll give you a tease on that one too. There is a way to learn how to communicate with each other where you're not attacking and you're not trying to dominate or overbearing someone. You're not lecturing them, and it works every single time. And believe it or not, the key is listening. And people think listening is agreeing. It's not. I'm just listening to you, Oh, okay, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And that's great. Now it's my turn. But we all go into this thinking we're going to close the deal. Like it's a one-call close. I'm gonna get you. Jay, you're going to believe in me. You're going to do what I tell you, how I do it. And that just doesn't work, and there's no vulnerability there. And when there's no vulnerability, there's no connection. Yeah. We'll talk more about it.
Well, I think you will get into that next week, but I mean, I just said this yesterday to a family, is, because they were struggling with how to frame the boundaries. And I was like, let's role play. Like, like, what are you going to say? And what it basically boiled down to is what I said, like, you're saying a paragraph when all you need is a sentence. And I think people over kind of talk like we all do. When I get uncomfortable, I just start rambling and so forth like that. I think the idea here, we'll get into next week, is you can pretty much probably put it into one or two sentences. And if you find yourself talking for 5+ minutes, you lost the boundary in the point, because the addict alcoholic, I'll just say from my standpoint, is going to latch on to something other than the boundary that you've said within that explanation. And I'd be like, wait a second, what you just brought up, I did not do that last Thursday. And then all of a sudden you're in this argument and the boundary is completely been thrown out the window. So I think, don't say a paragraph, say a sentence. So let's talk about that next week.
Yeah. And if you want to do your homework ahead of time, take a look at things like nonviolent communication, Google speaker listener, and we will have a ball. And we're going to talk about your childhood. Trust me, we're going to talk about your childhood. So
always with Kevin Peterson, we're going to talk childhood.
Yeah,
that's why I remain so guarded. So I don't want you to break that seal. and then all of a sudden I'm just crying. So
Okay. Well,
I've got defense mechanisms against you. I know your techniques.
my voodoo.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll get into this next week, and maybe just maybe I'll cry. Who knows? So I'll see you next week.
All right, bro.